Good evening. This is our meeting to go over new training materials, specifically what is designed for year two, day three. But for those of you in year three, it can be used there as well. And if you want to use it in a year, if you started this year, it can be used there also. Um, the After we go through the training, I've set aside today extra time. I know it's late, but there's some just odds and ends I want to talk about. So if you got to go, I'll follow up with an email and the recording. But I just want to make sure everyone has the information. So we're going to start talking about the training. Um, I've got open the PowerPoint. I've also got the facilitator guide. Now, with the facilitator guide, like in our other trainings, essentially, it's everything in the facilitator guide is cut and pasted into is what becomes the trainer notes. So you've got the facilitator guide, which is sort of a one-stop shop for the step-by-step process as a narrative. But when you get to the training, it's all cut and pasted into the bottom. And I've also got open the agenda, the PRP for this training, and the agenda. Where's the agenda? Here it is. The agenda, right? And the agenda is a little more text than usual for the teachers, just because there's some information we wanted them to have in front of them. This was a training that we started planning back in the summer. I think it was, I really don't, Maria and Twyla sort of started with creating an agenda and creating a plan. But then I think as we went through the year, we've gone back now and made many changes. So there's some elements of what they originally thought through, but there's also a lot of additions to it. And I've gone through it with several people, with Judy, with Twyla, and Maria. And so I've collaborated with several people. So, we have your general welcome, professional norms, big goal of the training. We go back to this is a staple slide because it really gets to the heart of what we're doing, trying to push our teaching into the deeper end because that's where the jobs are. Not because it makes us feel warm and fuzzy inside, but because that's what is required for our students if they want to move into the middle class or maintain a middle class lifestyle. That's what's going to have to be happening in their classrooms. And most of them don't have that. So we've got three main goals for today. The first goal is that that teachers can collaboratively analyze data to identify patterns and trends to provide new assignments that address gaps in understanding. Second, provide effective and timely feedback to students to improve their learning. And third, teach students to use discourse as part of the learning process. So remembering that clear learning intentions is a very high yield strategy. That's very important. We have for them a organizer, as we have before, and asking them to read through the goals for today and put some notes as to why you think this goal is important for teaching. Why is this one of our goals? So they sort of do some thinking and some sharing around all three targets. From there, we want to talk about a concept that is important. And we really, I think, as we rethink our new work, we want to introduce this earlier, which is the idea of evidence-based teaching. It's a little different from the term research-based training. You could do research on everything. The question is, where's the evidence that something works? This book, Visible Learning, is by a man named John Hattie, who is Australian, and it's really sort of the gold standard book of educational research today. The book you're looking at, the cover you're looking at here, is more of a reference book. It's not a book you would read cover from cover, but there's a book called Visible Learning for Literacy that everyone should buy if you haven't already. It's going to be referenced in this training. And it's a wonderful book. It's called Visible Learning for Literacy, where they take the research from this book and apply it to literacy. And what we want to do in our training more and more is point out where the LDC practices align with the strategies that we know work. So what he does in this book is meta-analysis of multiple research projects. So if we look at feedback, how do we know feedback works? Well, he doesn't do one study. He looks at 20 studies. So if 20 studies, each study has 1,000 people, that's 20,000 kids. So what that does is it creates a very large sample size. And the larger your sample size, the more accurate your data is. So he's spent 30 years doing this meta-analysis of multiple research studies to create this book. So I just gave you a quick explanation. If you get to this slide, you will need to be able to explain what this is to your teachers, what this all means. Effect size is another concept you'll need to explain to them. Effect size is the amount of the statistical growth a certain practice has beyond just normal growth. There's a normal cognitive development that people have as they grow older, interact with the world, generally learn to read, right? Well, to have a high effect size means that doing this practice statistically increases the amount of learning or the amount of achievement that happens beyond the normal amount. So things that have a high effect size have to be, according to this scale, 0.4 or above. That means that it's beyond normal. If it's in typical teacher area, which is that yellow area, that's like just what a kid just goes to school, the average teacher, that's pretty much what it would be. In the yellow size, it's if they don't go to school, if they just develop over time, that's pretty much the normal increase they would have over time. And then there's certain practices that are negative, which means they actually decrease the learning. One of those is summer, right? Summer decreases. Diagramming sentences actually decreases the amount of understanding kids have. Don't say that in your training. That'll cause a big uproar. Okay, so there's so that's why it's important that everyone have at least literacy, visible learning for literacy, because that will explain this well. Also, in the agenda, I think, is a link to an article that explains, is it not in there? I'm going to put it in there. It's the first chapter of Hattie's book that explains all of that stuff I just explained. So if you don't have the book, which you should, then you'll want to definitely read that chapter. And read that chapter, highlight it, underline it, use your mini task strategies, because that breaks down this whole concept of visible learning. Okay, so that being said, we want to engage our teachers to think about what works and what works really well and what just kind of works. So there's two strategies or two activities to introduce this in this training. Choose one or do both, but it probably wasn't time for both. So I put both in here. One of these is where you have a list of practices, and in the PRP is a handout for this sheet, okay, where they can mark it. Well, maybe they don't. Thought I had that in there. Okay. So we're going to put in a document in their PRP that has this, and they're going to type in their rankings, and then we will give them the actual rankings, right, of what they are. And the effect size, remember, 0.4 is the magic number. If it's 0.4 or above, it's that having an effect beyond the typical teacher. That means it's in the blue. So if you look at these, which of these are higher, which are lower? Why might they be higher or lower? Homework doesn't have a huge effect. Direct instruction does. Direct instruction does. Metacognitive strategies do. So again, having the book will help you be able to talk about these specific strategies. There's hundreds in there, so you'll want to look at some of these to see why that is. Just have the book with you and go to it, and then you can even hand it to somebody and say, "You tell me why it is." If they disagree, they may not understand. How is it possible that ability grouping? Don't tell our math people. Ability grouping has the least effect. Okay. Activity 2. Sort card. This is the preferable activity, I think. It's more involved, more preparation on your part, but it's far more hands-on. And Don is telling me that this strategy, this is in core tools and has everything in it as a mini task. Basically, you take those same strategies, a whole bunch of them, and you put them in 3 piles: low, medium, and high. Which of these are low effect? Which of these are high, medium? Which of these are high? So you have 3 basically lines, and you can even put them in low, from lowest to highest, so on and so forth. And then you give them the answer key, and you discuss, why certain things are where they are. Again, I go back, keep saying this, but having that book with you, if you get stuck, because there's some in here, because the activity itself is right in here. It's not task cards, grade 9 to 12.
Yeah, and it starts with John Hattie research.
Thank you, Don.
Right.
Thank you, Don. Thank you. Okay, so in here is the answer key. And Don, you see what I did, by the way? Don hadn't seen this before. I color coded it for you. So if you want to print this, isn't that nice?
It looks a lot better now. It'd be easier to do now.
Yeah. So it tells you which of these are. It's easier for them to check their answers when you hand this out to them. So we did this, but I would say that you do want to be prepared, because let me pull that up again. Ability grouping, okay, has a negative, almost a negative effect. Teacher subject knowledge, you could be an expert in your content, but not be a good teacher. So that doesn't have a huge effect. What's one of these, Don, that causes a lot of discussion?
It is the class size and subject matter knowledge.
Tell me about class size. What do they say?
Well, class size is, there's really no research saying that if you have 15 students, that your student achievement level is going to be higher than a classroom teacher with 30 students. But some teachers do feel that class size does have effect, where what has more of effect is how you facilitate the class. And then the subject matter knowledge, where Hattie really goes with that is that someone that owns the knowledge and always lecturing is not always transferring that knowledge to the students, where it's more effective when the students take ownership of the knowledge. So it's kind of like Sheldon, he might speak over the heads of everyone and no one gets it. So usually that's what I tell the teachers.
Why is inquiry? I would think inquiry-based instruction is this thing we all, project problem-based learning. How is that in the yellow?
Um, the reason why it's in the yellow is because Hattie says for something to be really successful, you need that direct instruction or that surface learning, something that prepares them with the background research so that they're able to go deep. And what happens with inquiry-based learning is you throw them into the deep end and they sink or swim. So there's a lot of frustrations with teachers and students that if they don't have enough background knowledge, then they're not successful when they're out on their own doing inquiry-based instruction.
So in this book, it explains why these scores are what they are. You don't have to feel like you need to explain the way Don did. Don has really delved into this research like a champ and has read the book, multiple books from Hattie, and he's really been excellent for me in helping me think about this as well. However, it's a lot of information. So I think it's okay to say, that's a good question. Here's the book, or here's this. That let's make a note and let's look at that later. I'm gonna come back to you maybe during the break or in a follow up. But don't feel like you need to, if you don't have an answer to why time on task, what does that really mean? Don't feel like you need to go too into it.
One thing that I did, Dan, was I actually ordered an extra book and I cut all those pages out and then laminated them. That way I could just hand them that strategy. If a teacher has homework, well, I could give different ones to each teacher, then they could do a close read and then they could present why that strategy.
I'm gonna say that's a little illegal, but
If I laminate a page,
I mean, you're not supposed to reproduce things like that without permission. So
I didn't reproduce it. It's my book, right?
your book, but okay, that's fine. I didn't hear what you said. Okay, so why did we do all of this? We did it because these three elements that we're going to talk about today, collective teacher efficacy, feedback, and classroom discussion, are all at the top level. Now, unfortunately, this beautiful chart doesn't have classroom discussion, but they are all top. In fact, collective teacher efficacy is at the very top. So we need to take a minute, though, and talk about what does that mean? What is collective teacher efficacy? So I might do some turn and talk about what is this? What is that? What are we talking about when we say collective teacher efficacy? Then I would give this quote, which it's basically teachers having a collective self-perception that in a given school, a school can make an educational difference in their students over and above the educational impact of their home life. All of you, I know, have this view that teachers and school has a bigger impact on students than just, the challenges of their life. Obviously, the challenges of their lives is challenges, but according to, when a group of teachers come together and as a team collectively believe that they can impact student learning, then that is the most impactful practice you can put into action. So the goal of the first part of this training is to actualize collective teacher efficacy. It's very abstract concept. What does that even look like? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to put that into practice. Now, in order to do this, we need two things. We need student work, which means it can be one of two things. It can be either the benchmark mini tasks class set that we asked everyone to teach between the last session and this session. Now, there's going to be cases, everyone's in a different place, and there's districts and schools where, they just don't have it, or they don't remember, or they just can't pull it together, or you didn't do this last time. So I've got some people on the case. Maria and Judy are working with people to get a class set of benchmark mini tasks that we can just put in this folder. If anybody else has teachers who are teaching benchmark mini tasks, I don't want a full essay. I want a intro paragraph or a claim or a outline. If anyone else has that from the benchmark mini task collection, please let me know and try to get a class set copied so we can have that in case people don't bring it. But obviously, the power is going to be in them bringing their own. So we're going to do a review of what is the benchmark mini tasks. And that's what these are. I don't know how much you need to go into this. This is just sort of a way of saying review benchmark mini tasks, what they were, what they are. And then what is the power of these mini tasks? What we asked them to do, hopefully last time, was to teach the same mini task, but for your content area. Because what that's going to allow you as teachers to do is common formative assessment. And this is where you put collective teacher efficacy into practice. A group of teachers looking at results from their instruction, formative assessment, and making some changes to what they're teaching as a team. So they've got 4 major questions of common formative assessment. What do students need to know, do, and understand? That's the skill of that benchmark mini task and the standard. How will I know if they have learned? That's the scoring guide. What will I do if they don't understand? What will I do if they do? If we as a team can answer these questions, then we are ensuring that we have a plan to address our students' learning. So what I'm going to ask the teachers to do here is take their class set and separate it into 3 piles individually. Does not meet, meets, exceeds. I just think that's the coolest visual, but I was really proud of this one. Anyway, does not meets, meets, exceeds. And they're going to just put them in piles. Then, as a school team, they're going to not analyze, but just chart it. Just chart it. Does not meet, meets, exceeds. They can do it on chart paper, right? There's 4 teachers, 3 teachers. How many in each pile? If they're a Google school, they can put it in a Google spreadsheet, but they all need to be able to see it and look at it at the same time. So from there, we move into the beautiful Atlas. Come on, Atlas. Protocol, right? Which is in the PRP. And in this protocol, there's these steps, right? Describe the data, interpret the data, implications for our classroom, reflecting on the data, reflecting on the process. It's all described in the handout. You'll want to take a moment at the start, though, to just hit what these are and make sure every group has a timer and a person timing and a facilitator. And that I highlighted implications for classroom practice because that's the most important one, right? Okay, so we've got look at my kids in this pile at the top. What am I going to do for them? Look at these people at the bottom. What am I going to do for them? What about the people in the middle, right? So that's differentiated instruction. That's all that. So that to me is the key question. So when we come back together, what I'm going to ask folks to share is what were our implications for classroom practice? What did you guys talk about at this table about gaps and strengths you found? What are you guys going to do to address those gaps and strengths? Interesting. I like that. What about you all at Peter Pan Middle School? So, and then of course, always processing the process, which is not just what did you think about the process. It's more here. How is this happening at your school? This type of thing. Is there anything like this happening in your school? How could you take this type of collaborative this is what PLCs are meant to be. How can you make this something, adjust what we just did? What would have to happen for this to this happen at your school? I say that because this is the only part of the training where we're really digging into spread. And we know year two we want to hit that. So it's important that we emphasize that this is the teachers doing this in your schools never have to hear about LDC, but they're doing LDC. So what will you do back in your school to put collective teacher efficacy into action? What can you commit to? I'm going to pause. I saw was there anything in here? Okay. So next is we've looked at that, we've collaborated as a team, but let's talk about this next very effective thing that everyone can do, and it's something that we all experience in our daily lives all day, every day, which is feedback. Um, and also, I forgot back here, we would take a minute to go back to our organizer, right? And think about, did we meet our target, right? What I learned about this LT, two things I can do in the classroom based on this learning experience. Okay. So take a minute and reflect on a time you set a goal for yourself and had a friend, a colleague, a partner, an electronic device provide feedback that helped you meet that goal. What made that feedback effective? Common goal for a lot of people is often weight loss, right? Also exercise. My goal was to run a 5K in under 15 minutes. I ran with my best friend, and as we were running, he was showing me how I could adjust my stride. Or I had a tennis lesson. This is real, last night, and if you've been coached, the feedback is immediate. He gives you a example. He tells you exactly where you should hit the ball. All of these elements of feedback. So you want to give an example and then have them share with each other examples. Also, data is a type of feedback. So those of you who run on a treadmill, right? As you're running on the treadmill, you set a goal. The first thing it might ask you is set a goal for a time or a speed or things like that. And it's always telling you how you're doing. That's all a type of feedback too. And that's the thing, is that feedback is effective, but it's effective when done in a certain way. So this is some direct instruction on a synthesis of what John Hattie in his book says is required for there to be a high effect size. It needs to relate to the learning target. it should say in some way what the goal is and how you relate to that goal, right? So, you're not hitting the ball, as fast as you should be. You want to hit it full over the ball, and you want to swing all the way, and you're only swinging halfway, right? So you say what you want to do, and then talk about where you are in terms of getting to that goal. It does not threaten self-esteem. When we talk about anybody personally, it just triggers an emotional response that makes listening to the feedback impossible. So in order for feedback to work, it has to avoid triggering any kind of emotional feeling. You've all experienced that before, probably with me. So how do you do that? Part of it is not focusing on the person and focusing on the work, focusing on what's there, and avoiding the same thing with good job. You're so smart, you're a great student. All of those things actually can be counterproductive because they put your intelligence and your personality at stake. So if you do bad, then you're not a good student. So the more you can just stick to the facts. Being descriptive, right? Providing detail. I think that's pretty obvious. What you did well and what you need to work on. And actionable. Next steps you can take. In the training for local trainers, there's a bunch of stuff in there on feedback. Some great stuff that LDC uses. And all of that can apply to students for what makes good feedback. So, but no one's going to remember all that stuff I just said. So we want to have 3 key questions. All of that research is synthesized into these 3 questions. Where am I going? How am I going? And where next? Where am I going? How am I going? And where next? If we can address these questions when we get feedback, we're going to have that high effect. It's going to make a big difference. But Mr. Rock, says the teacher, I have 150 things to grade, and I have all these essays. How am I going to write this type of feedback? Well, teacher, let's take a look at this article because you're right. That is a challenge. So let's see what this says in terms of tips that can help us think about that. This is an important one right here. One skill at a time. So when I read an essay, I'm not going to give feedback on everything. I'm going to pick the main thing that's important. Yada, 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 yada. So this is an article that we're going to let them read and annotate and just talk about briefly. But we do want to give them a chance to read that because that's a very legitimate concern. So now that we've talked about that, let's put it into practice. You've got your student benchmarks. I want you to read through them, and I'm going to give you X amount of time, maybe 20, I put 30 minutes here. 30 minutes for you to write feedback. You're not going to get through all of them, but get through what you can in the time allotted. And after 20 minutes, I'm going to ask you to switch with a partner and just look at the feedback and see if it answers these questions. So we've done that. We've shared, maybe have some teachers share feedback they wrote on their papers. So what elements of good feedback are consistently present in your classroom? What of this stuff, what of what we did today is happening in your classroom now? Be honest. Which type of feedback are you good at? And what feedback are you not good at? I know the not addressing, making it personal, that's a challenge for me. So all of that kind of stuff is, you want to put that in there based on what you learned. How will you provide better feedback? Great. It's a debrief and then go back to our organizer and fill that in. Questions about what we've talked about so far? Was there a question in the chat that I missed?
Dan, it was for me. It was the slide before this learning target, the wording of that question to process, and I didn't get the slide number down. Looked like there was something missing in that statement, that question statement on the
The
slide.
question didn't show up in the chat.
Oh,
What was it about?
okay, it's back here, yeah. It's before this piece. Before that, okay, back. Right here. How will you bring this process back to your school input collective teacher efficacy? Am I reading it? Okay, sorry. Yeah, that was it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now this next part's a bit of a hard turn, but when, we talked about collective teacher efficacy, we talked about feedback. Well, part of as a classroom, right, is learning how to discuss what we're learning and use oral language to intelligently and clearly discuss the key, findings and learnings, and to process it in a module that's often happens in the transition to writing, but it can happen in all 4 sections. And we're going to get to that at the end of this section. There's a great video, engagement video here, where this is from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and he's basically just saying, so the economic factor is anyone, input and output, and this is a result of anyone, supply and demand. It's very funny. Watch it, and the question is, what is he doing wrong? Right? What's he doing that makes this an ineffective use of questioning? Oh, we're talking about questioning because that's a big part of student discourse. And so we're going to think about how, as a teacher, do you ask students questions that will engage them in a quality discussion about what they're learning. This is an article on questioning that's in the PRP. 3 steps for improving the questions you give your students as part of discussion. Now, that's a great article. I want them to read it. If you have to drop something, that would be the thing that you can drop, because, just if time is an issue. The power of student discourse, though, is not in the teacher asking the students questions. It's in the students learning to ask each other questions. It's in learning how to ask good questions of the text and then using those questions in your analysis, both verbal and writing. So as a teacher, the student is owning the learning and is owning the discussion. How can I scaffold the skill of creating good questions? Well, this is a strategy that I picked up back in my days as a teacher in Miami, Florida, many, many years ago. And they gave this to us it was really as a test prep tool. The test was really organized into these types of questions, the big test. But it was amazingly powerful. These are question stems, and students can use these stems to create questions of the text according to specific cognitive demands: validity and reliability of information, text structure, main idea, Analyze and evaluate. Compare and contrast. Looking familiar? So depending on what you're reading for, author's purpose, perspective, synthesize. You can choose specific task cards to give to students. So what I want to share with teachers here is how to use this or similar strategies to get students to scaffold the skill of creating questions as part of a classroom discussion. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you an article. It's in the PRP called Free Trade, Good or Bad. You are in an economics classroom. At your table with your school, each table is going to have its own question. So this table over here, McNair Middle School, you are compare and contrast task card. McAdoo High School, you are synthesized task card. So every table gets an individual task card. As they read individually, they will write questions using their card individually. When they finish reading, they share their questions and determine which one required the most rigorous thinking to answer it. And everyone writes down that question. So, dang, Quentin, your question really made me think. That's a question I would want to use in my classroom. Okay, everyone in this group write down that question. Now I want to count off by fives. Hopefully there's 5 people at the table. If not, you can count off, you might need to mix it up so that there's 5 people per table at that original table. We would call that the home group. And this would be the expert group, where they go to this table and they share their questions. So now I'm going to hear a main idea question. I'm going to hear a compare and contrast question. I'm going to hear a synthesized question, yada, yada, yada. And we're going to have 1 or 2 people answer my questions. And then share with the teacher, the facilitator, which one of those were the best, were the most thought-provoking. And that the facilitator, the SRB trainer, is going to share those questions with the whole group and maybe lead a small discussion. The point isn't the discussion. The point is how, as a teacher, can you teach your students to ask good questions, to lead their own discussions. This is one way, right? What I include in the agenda is other questioning stems, question stem, that from other places. That's sort of the idea. This isn't necessarily the greatest strategy, but it is one that shows the concept of empowering the students to create their questions, to lead their own discussions. Fishbowl is a common thing, Socratic seminar, right? This is a way in, though, to scaffold it for other kids. Okay, PLP time. Let's watch the video of the PLP student discourse. I don't think it's 20. This one isn't 20 minutes long. This one is only 10 minutes long. And we're going to watch the video. And as we watch the video, as we did in the others, we're going to look for what the teacher is doing, what the students are doing, and artifacts that show learning is happening. Okay, so now let's see what tools are at our fingertips to increase student discourse through the LDC model. So everyone's going to open up Core Tools, go to the LDC library. Again, another nice slide, I must say. You're going to type discussion in the field here, and then filter for good to go, exemplary, and mini task and collections. And that'll give you 87 mini tasks that teach the skill of discussion. So I gave you, we just did one. Now here are 87 more, right? Find one or two mini tasks that you can use immediately to build student discourse into your current lesson plans. Make a copy of these and add them to your library. So that's some time of just reading and learning. So now, though, we run the risk, and Dr. Bottoms made the point to me today that he had a concern, which is that that as we talk about short-term literacy-based assignments, that we going to move too much into that. People are interpreting that into strategies. We're teaching the strategy of the week, and we're losing the idea of the power of a quality assignment that engages in reading and writing together. I say that to say I want to reserve time for teachers to using either a teaching task from last year or a new teaching task that you've written or a literacy-based assignment that you're going to teach, but an assignment that's going to write in response to reading. Develop a module that will provide opportunities to teach student discourse skills. So they want to really dig into creating a module here that has that in it. But they can revise one that they taught last year that they're going to teach this year. But it should be applicable, right? But one that they're going to teach. It could be one in the LDC library that they like, but they're going to revise it in order to use the a lot more discourse in it. So then, just sort of summarizing that, whip around the room, one action you'll take to improve your feedback and increase student discourse.
I'm going to be in the garage for a second and get something, okay?
Okay, sorry. And then our homework is teach a module that includes higher level student discourse, reteach your benchmark mini tasks, and collaboratively score student work and analyze results, as we did today, and work with buddy teachers to also teach these mini tasks and modules with you. Okie dokie. Thoughts, questions, concerns? Quentin says, I wonder if it will be more effective to demonstrate or model how to score analytically rather than having them read an article. That way they have a visual of how to do it. Quentin, explain what you mean, please.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so when we were looking at the exercise where they will be looking at how to score that benchmark mini task,
Okay.
one of the challenges that continue to come up is with the number of students that they have to teach and the number of standards that they have to cover, finding time to grade
Gotcha.
or score those writing products, even if it's a paragraph or one page, because this is not in their everyday practice. if this is a science teacher or a social studies teacher, they didn't necessarily approach building students towards mastery with grading, writing in mind. So instead of giving them an article to read to try to then discover or make sense of how to do it themselves, it probably, and you know, this is just based off of my experiences and from my perspective, is probably would be more effective to explain that concept to them and then use an example of an introductory paragraph to show them how one would do it, rather than having them to read an article and say, take from the article how to do it, now go try to do it. It's no different than how that explanation and modeling piece needs to take place during instruction.
So have a paragraph. So basically,
Mhm.
because this is the slide I have up is what you're referring to.
Yes.
So what would that? So you would give them.
Mhm.
What would you do?
So let's say if it's a science teacher and the science teacher is looking at a specific part of a lab report that students created, instead of having them to read and decide how you would score that, the presenter, him or herself, go ahead and practice how you would score that specific part or short demonstration of a student piece of work. And during the training, you would just walk through. So as a teacher, me knowing that I now have 120 short writing products to grade or
Yeah.
score, here's how I would approach doing it using the rubric or using this mindset from the rubric. And that way, you're really directing them in the way that you want them to go, looking at student performance as it relates to whatever they want them to take from it. Because reading that article, it could address multiple things, and different people can take different things away from it. And now when we come back the following training, we'll have people all over the place. But just go ahead and model where this example of student work and how you can
That's
apply it.
fine. That's
I
fine.
think that'll really save a lot of time.
Just remember that the purpose of this isn't scoring; it's feedback. So the thing,
Yeah, I know. I'm saying scoring instead of grading because the concern is the amount of student products they're going to have to grade. Now, I'm using scoring because really that's what they're doing. They're scoring analytically. But the main concern here is I'm teaching, it's approaching the last, like tomorrow I have a training. Their biggest concern is it's approaching the end of the year, and those students are going to take another assessment, and they're going to be held accountable to those students' performance. So if I say read something and take from that how to do it, it's going to seem like I'm putting it on them rather than me showing them how it can be done in the most effective way, and you still meet your responsibilities as a teacher.
right? So for this section, then I think that's a smart move to uh, have examples to model with the group, and if
Mm-hmm.
that replaces the reading, I think that's fine. It may be that you just include this as an article for them to read on their own, just as a reference, just to see. But it does make sense that, and I'm going to put that as a note in here. That you're right. There needs to be a modeling of good feedback.
Someone made the point earlier that just because you're good in a certain field, that doesn't make you a good teacher. And that's really the spirit of that suggestion that I made, because I'm pretty sure a lot of the people who we work with have a wide capacity when it comes to content knowledge. But when you talk about instructional delivery, and the art of teaching, they have to be shown what it looks like for when you get back into the classroom. Because when they're reading, a lot of time they're reading from their professional lens, from their academic lens. And that's good if you're trying to learn something for yourself and apply it to your own individual goals. But when you talk about going back into the classroom, and I think that kind of goes into class size, whether it's 15 or 35, if you don't know what it looks like, it really don't matter.
Quentin, may I ask a question?
Certainly.
When you're talking about modeling, you're talking about modeling during the training rather than doing this piece around feedback. My question is, how then are you going to address in that one modeling piece, you know, the teachers who may be sitting there saying, because whatever piece you select, social studies, English, whatever, you're going to have 1/4 of your group with you. Everybody else is going to be saying, well, not in my backyard, or, you know, you run that risk. So I'm wondering if the modeling piece is important. Let me show you how I'm going to do commentary.
Right.
But could it be small enough so you could have 4 tries or 3 tries and, you know, only do something from each of the content, because we've made a point around the literacy and content, the disciplinary reading and writing. So I hate to take one piece and spend time showing, you know, where I would do commentary, because what you're talking about when you're talking about modeling here around commentary, it sounds like to me more like a think aloud, talk aloud. What you would do to take something to give commentary, not to score it, but to give commentary. So maybe we need something on that slide that in the coaching prior to this training, you know, the in school, whether the local trainer or whether it's you, you know, the one of us, have talked to groups of teachers or done something with them around scoring. So when they come and you have these little excerpts, let me show you how I'm going to do, how I would do commentary with this small piece. And then, so, I mean, I'm with you on that. I hate to get away from this reading piece altogether. And my fear is if you say, y'all read that on your own, you know, it's a toss away. But maybe even if you could reference, here is what I did, it's in this piece, you know, to make that connection, because everybody, just like you said, Quentin, everybody is all over the place with the commentary, and they need some physicality, you know, like you know, like, oh, it's going to look like this. So I'd like us to think about how we do that.
Yeah, and so to be like just as honest as I can, right now, most teachers, even if, and once again, I'm thinking about the entities that I'm working with, even if I gave them that article and I framed it and did all the necessary steps to make it clear where we're going with it, because of the weight of what they've been dealing with since August, they still probably won't take it. And even like I gave pre-work in October for the training that I did yesterday, and 100% people showed up without it being done. And this is with me following up. So when I'm saying maybe if we show it, I'm thinking about efficiency, because really, I think it's our responsibility that when we are doing any example, to try to meet the needs of everyone in there. So what I've been doing, and not that what I do is absolute law or the most perfect way to do it, but I've been trying to touch on every content area throughout my experiences of showing examples. So although this time I may be talking about science, you can rest assured the next time I'll be talking about social studies or CTAE. But the main focus here shouldn't be the subject matter. it's the practice, because no matter what the goal for instruction is, the concern is you have 120 students and you're looking for the most efficient way to score these papers without it being an extra add-on to everything you have to do in your traditional role. So here's how we do that. And it just so happens we're looking at this fill in the blank content example to do that. But what we're focusing on is how to score it without being overwhelmed and distracted by the other things.
Okay, and I may be confused, and it's late in the evening, so I won't go into that, but I certainly agree. But this section is about feedback to students, which can be informal before anything is scored. It can be even walking around what I call drive-by conferences as kids are working, giving feedback. It's about feedback that's doable without being a burden. And I know what you're talking about, scoring without being a burden.
Yeah.
So I think I don't want us to confuse those two things right here.
Right.
But I'll leave it to you guys as experts, and be glad to do whatever you decide.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna put a piece in here about the importance of finding a piece to model feedback on.
Yeah, I agree.
And
That's very important.
I'll look for
Here's how
something.
I would do it.
I'll look for something that's out there that might already exist, but obviously an authentic example is better. Anything else before? I do need a couple more minutes just to talk about a few administrative things. And I'll send a follow-up email also. Okay. So, we all know the drill, right? Every few months there's a report, and Dan, me, and everyone sends you a bunch of hair on fire emails. So, with your entity reports, you already include the school visit summary and the entity snapshot. For the module count template, make sure it's the one for the CRM that doesn't have module names, just has the number, it has the teacher, the email, and the number. And also, and this is new, but the list of teachers on a separate sheet in this, like you create a new tab, and the list of teachers total for the entity that are spread teachers, including the name, email, school, and content area. We just need to keep that up to date as much as possible. Hopefully, it shouldn't change much between now and the next time you do it, so it shouldn't be something to change, but we do want to keep that up to date. I sent everyone that list of people who were in the CRM as local trainers but had not been certified. Several people sent me responses. If I didn't get a response, I imagine everything is A-OK, as it should be. Thank you, everyone who did reply, and those who went into the CRM and fixed it. So if it's wrong now, you can log in, search for that person, and click certified. Quentin can attest to that. Thank you. Big thank yous to these folks who have helped us get vignettes and newsletters from folks. Some of them, like Judy and Don, have gotten me both a vignette and a newsletter. And Dana, thank you, thank you, thank you. The vignette is the one written by the teacher, where if we choose it, they get the gift card. The newsletter is the form filled out by you about a teacher. Again, we're trying to create a whole pool of collateral that we can use in different states to market ourselves. So that's what this is all about. I'm counting on you all helping in getting those in. The newsletters, I haven't gotten them from everybody though, the forms. So please, 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 if you have not sent me anything, January 5th, I'm setting as a date for, if you have not sent anything, please send. Some of you, Pam and Don have sent, and Judy, multiple. So you all can take a break, and I need everyone else to tell their stories of their great teachers in their districts. So part of this marketing is also showcases. We are planning a showcase in North Carolina, South Carolina, Louisiana, Delaware, and Oklahoma. It's going to be not like last year. It's going to be purely a pitch. We're going to try to get districts there and invite some of your teachers in schools and have them tell their story about how LDC has changed their lives as a school. So what I'm going to do, we're have a good idea of which schools we want to use. I asked you all to nominate some. Thank you who filled out that form. And I'm going to follow up with you and set up a call with like the people who work with the schools in North Carolina and talk about what's their story. What is the Newberry story? How have they evolved and I'm thinking the unit is a school. So telling the story of a school or a district, but we don't want isolated teachers. I had a district where I have one good teacher in this school, one good teacher in that school. That's not what we're looking for. What's going to get people excited is a systemic change where the way teachers work and collaborate and plan and curriculum itself has shifted is what we want to highlight. So please fill out that link. Thank you to my tweeters. As you tweet, in order for us to retweet it and see it, we need you to tag, is the term, Dan Rock, SREB, Dan Millette, SRB Education. Then we retweet to all of our people, and it really gets it out there. And use the hashtag SREB Literacy. Next week, we've got some local trainer trainings. I sent you the sign-up list today. Some of the groups are bigger than others. Please talk with other people who work with those local trainers to see what amazing things they're doing, if they are, so that they can talk about it and share it and highlight their best practices. On the call with us is Rebecca Holt, I think, and she has been at work till 7:30, 8 o'clock every day updating our data so that we can share with the funders and Dr. Bottoms and everyone else, all the correct numbers. So that's sort of why we're, getting all this stuff. So thank you, Rebecca, and thank you all of you out there in the field. Feel free to call me or email me. I will be sending out this recording with the associated documents tomorrow. Thank you for staying with us so late, and please have a great week, and I'll talk to you all very soon.